My partner once told me there are way too many board games themed around colonization and empire building, and you know what? She's kinda right. My partner isn't an avid gamer like me. I mean, she'll play games when the mood takes her, but she wouldn't, for instance, make a YouTube channel about them. She's not crazy. Nonetheless, her observation motivated me to start looking for games with more varied themes. That shift in my thinking led to the discovery of ECOS' first continent. In ECOS, each player takes on the role of a force of nature, using their powers to shape the terrain and populate it with trees, mountains, and an impressive variety of animals. This sounds like a nice, polite, collaborative experience, but ECOS is in fact a competitive race for victory points. Victory points that represent how much each player exerted their own influence during the creation of the continent. If you can remember a group project you worked on where everyone ends up hating each other by the end, yeah, it's basically that, but more fun, hopefully. You derive your continent molding powers from various elements: sun, water, grass, twigs, circles, a triangle of creepy eyeballs, some angry rainbow faces, and deer. These elements are represented by tiles, which are revealed from a bag every turn. If you have a matching symbol on a card you control, you can cover the spot with a cube. Cover all the spaces on a card and you get to yell, ECOS! And resolve the effects listed on the card. These effects can include acquiring more elements to contribute to other cards, placing land or water tiles, placing mountains, trees, or animals on existing tiles, moving animals around, making animals eat other animals, you monster, and acquiring victory points. There's even a card that lets you do the Free Willy jump, but it doesn't instantly win you the game, so everything Disney ever taught me is a lie. Even if you don't have a matching symbol for a tile that was just drawn, you aren't completely out of luck. You have a player dial that, in addition to helpfully reminding you how many elements of each type there are in the bag, can also be turned 90 degrees every time you can't cover a symbol on a card. 2 rotations will net you a new card from the deck, while 3 turns will allow you to acquire either an extra cube for covering symbols or allow you to play a previously acquired card from your hand onto the table. I've heard people contend that ECOS is basically just bingo, and I find this view incredibly short-sighted. Yes, the mechanics by which you derive resources are fundamentally the same as bingo, but that's not the core of the ECOS experience. It's like saying that Catan is basically Yahtzee because you get resources by rolling dice. The depth of ECOS becomes apparent once you start activating cards. Many of these cards will have some combination of the effects I mentioned earlier. You'll place a tile, maybe an animal, score a couple of victory points, and that'll be it. In the early stages of the game, the addition of terrain and animals seems oddly lacking in context, and it kind of is. However, the real magic of the game lies in setting up a big score, which you can't do with one card alone. For instance, there's a card that lets you place a shark on the board and score 5 victory points. Then you get to move that shark up to 4 spaces, removing any animals in those spaces. You then score 4 victory points for every animal removed. By itself, this card will net you 5 points and leaves you with a very hungry shark. But if you had used other cards to populate spaces with a few animals ahead of time, you place your shark, move your shark, eat some fish, and score a bunch of extra points in the process. Those big plays highlight another great thing about ECOS: no lead is safe. I've seen players acquire as many as 30 victory points in a single turn because they set up ideal conditions to maximize the effect of one of their more powerful cards. The other factor that helps the game feel balanced is the fact that any card you're trying to activate is face up on the table. Any other player can have a look at the cards you're able to activate and get a rough idea of what you're trying to achieve and take measures to try and prevent it. In a recent game, I was one element away from scoring big off of a card that gave me victory points for every space in the smallest landmass on the table. At the time, there was only one landmass in the game, and it contained a whopping 13 tiles. Just before I could pull this off, another player saw what was about to happen and placed one land tile across the ocean, making the smallest landmass worth 1 lousy victory point. I was a very sad nature spirit that day. This is strategy, folks. Constant push and pull between all players trying to maximize their own acquisition of points while minimizing everyone else's. You don't need to be an experienced strategy gamer to get invested either. In spite of all the random chaos I've described already, ECOS is surprisingly coherent to follow, even at high player counts. In case it isn't obvious yet, I really like ECOS, but the game isn't beyond criticism. My biggest complaint is the pacing. When people are activating cards and comboing effects together and scoring points, the game is fantastic and endlessly interesting. Between those moments, though, there is a lot of downtime. Turns and turns will go by when you'll draw a tile, cover a space on a card, and nothing will happen. Even in the early game when cards do go off, they'll often have effects that don't really seem consequential. Yeah, willing a mountain gorilla into existence sounds awesome, but if you have no follow-up card that scores points off gorillas somehow, the act feels a bit hollow, like you're doing something because the game requires it instead of being a part of some master plan. Then there's the little matter of false advertising. Yeah, the promotional material for this game kinda flat out lies to people. It's a nitpick for sure, but ECOS touts its own gameplay as simultaneous, implying that everyone takes their turns at the same time, meaning there's no downtime for any player. This sounds pretty great, but in the purest sense of what simultaneous gameplay really is, it's a half-truth at best. The tile drawing part of the game is simultaneous. Everyone gets to decide what card to assign their elements to at the same time. However, once card effects start going off, they are resolved in turn order, starting with the player holding the tile bag and working around the table. Since it's possible to combo 3 or 4 cards and all of their effects together in a single play, resolving one player's effects can create some not insignificant downtime for other players. In the grand scheme of things though, these complaints are pretty minor. I currently own over 100 board games and I can say confidently none of them play like ECOS. So seriously, stop building castles or selling spices or whatever and go play ECOS.